Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be continuing our series, The Last Refuge of a Scoundrel. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at what is robust patriotism. Now, robust patriotism, or communitarian patriotism, moves slightly along the spectrum of patriotism from extreme patriotism towards cosmopolitanism, but only by a step. This view is not quite as far from cosmopolitanism as extreme patriotism, but it is still far from allowing a universal ethics to dictate the actions of a patriot. Basically, a robust patriot must show support for the values and interests of their country, but is allowed to fight against a government that opposes those values. So, for example, while an extreme patriot living in a society that values democracy would need to follow the orders of their government if they were told to stuff ballot boxes or attack elected leaders, the robust patriot could refuse, since these actions are against the values and interests of the country. Their love is not directed at a specific government, but rather at a set of principles and the country thought of as a collective project. Now, this position is most commonly associated with the philosopher Alasdair MacIntyre, who argued against the liberal notion of universal moral values. According to MacIntyre, there is no universal morality, only the morality taught to us by our particular community. These communal values that are instilled in us by our community are the only way that we can be moral agents at all. For MacIntyre, if separated from our communities, we cannot be moral agents, since we have no moral standards to be judged against. Based on this, the loyalty and love that patriots feel is directed towards their community, the project of their country, its founding values that those patriots were raised in. One is patriotic if one upholds the values of the country one was raised in, even if those values are opposed to the values of other countries or supposed universal values, which MacIntyre doesn't really believe in. If your country thinks that a particular ethnic group is lesser, according to MacIntyre, it's patriotic to demean that group of people, and should be seen not as a moral failing, but as a moral strength, because the only morality that really exists is that which is taught by your community. And if you are of that ethnic group and you are taught by your community that you are lesser, you should believe that and you should accept that, because that's the morality of your community. MacIntyre admits that supporting the larger interests of your country may be irrational at times, but for MacIntyre, patriotism is necessarily irrational. Now, there are a range of objections that might be raised to MacIntyre's views. It seems that for the communitarian nationalist, check out our video on the specifics of that position, there are some situations where genocide against a minority ethnic group is not merely in the interests of the country, but is sanctioned by the country's founding values. In fact, if you are a citizen and a member of that ethnic group, you have a responsibility to be degraded and killed, because that was the community you were raised in. In fact, arguments similar to MacIntyre's have been used to justify genocides throughout history. Far worse, anyone that refused to participate in such a genocide would not merely be morally neutral, but would actually be immoral for such a refusal due to their lack of patriotism, or at the very least they could be said to not be exemplifying the values of patriotism. Most people think that genocide is never permissible, let alone obligatory in order to exemplify a virtue, so would reject MacIntyre's view out of hand. Communitarian ideals are great when you agree with the values espoused by them, but not all cultures have values you will agree with. And in fact, many cultures have values and beliefs about degrading and demeaning other ethnic groups. But robust patriots must be committed to these values and the larger projects of their country, regardless of those individual patriots' beliefs about the morality of those values. Beyond this, there's the problem of apostasy. A robust patriot may be able to question their government's commitment to a country's values or the underlying project of that country, but they cannot question the values themselves or the project. A cosmopolitan, under such a view, is not someone who merely disagrees with the robust patriot, but is actually immoral, as they're opposed to the project of the country by advocating for all humanity. The reason that this is because there's no underlying moral standard to judge your country's values based on. The bottom, rock bottom, is your country's moral standards. And so those can't be questioned because any action or any act of questioning is always going to be only judged back against those standards, not against some broader understanding of morality. Without our universal morality, there's no way to question or critique the project of the country. Additionally, there's a question as to what level the community should be set at. The universalist might agree with MacIntyre that values are instilled by a community, but argue that this community is not a particular community, but rather the entire world, and therefore global norms should take precedence. This individual might argue that, in fact, within communities, there are often, and almost always are, dissenters and disagreements about values, but a majority or a group in power overrides. And such is the same with the global sphere. And so there's no way for you to say that, oh, within an individual community, everyone's homogenous and everyone has the same beliefs and values. There are always apostates. There are always minority groups that will disagree, even if that minority is simply around their thought process or their beliefs and values. And so we can't trim it down to this clear, clean-cut, homogeneous community because those are a thing of fancy. They don't exist. Under this view, the country level is completely arbitrary. Why not set the level at an individual family, or town, or region instead? Why do country-level ethical considerations take precedence over family ones or global ones? All of these communities are those that teach people ethics, not just communities of different sizes. So what gives preference to a country-level community as opposed to something else? Further, we might be concerned about countries who have the value of self-reflection and free debate. How could an individual in such a society be patriotic? If they question their society's values or projects, they are not a patriot by MacIntyre's definition, because they're questioning the values of society. But if they do not, they're not upholding society's values of debate and self-reflection, and so are not a patriot in that way either. It seems that in a free society, there's no way to be a true, robust patriot, and the only societies that can be robust patriots are those who value blind faith and loyalty. Such an objection might be dismissed if there were not societies that valued freedom of speech, free and open debate, and free expression. However, it seems that there are countries which do exactly this, however imperfectly they live up to these standards. If a country exists where an integral part of its value system is to question and subject their value system to critical gaze of rationality, it seems there can be no robust patriots there, as part of the project of a country is challenging that very project. Overall, while robust patriotism may create stronger institutions that are able to self-correct in the face of a dictator that attempts to undercut the values and the project of the country, it will still oppress dissenters who want to change those values or who think that the project of humanity is more important than the project of an individual country. What do you think? Is a true patriot someone that is committed to the values and project of their country, but not the individual government? Or does that only apply when you already agree with the values of the country? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video and you want to see more, go ahead and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so that you can make sure to catch the rest of the videos in this series. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.